Hey everybody, what's going on? I'm Rob Cesternino, back again for the Amazing Race recap. It was season 34, episode 3, on a night they called the Mega Leg. And here to talk about it, our Amazing Race panel that I've put together like a Ducati. Here we go with the big cheese of Amazing Race podcasting. It's Jessica Liese.
Well, I hope I have 88 pounds worth of thoughts here, Rob.
I hope so. Okay, roll them out, cut them up.
That's what I do every week.
Yeah. Okay. And then here with us back again, the always humorous Mike Bloom.
Yeah, that's the closest I'll get to being humorous besides the skeleton outfit. Excited to be here. Yeah, Mega Leg Part 1. I guess we just call it Mega, right? Drop the leg, keep the Mega.
Not Will Mega?
Yeah, no. Unfortunately not. Because we saw Part 1, essentially. We knew that this was coming, right? The little bit of the loophole of no non-elimination legs. Essentially, what they did then was just, okay, split one big leg across 2 episodes of The Amazing Race.
Like a block of cheese.
Exactly, and then deliver it to 2 different restaurants in the forms of our households across 2 different weeks. So we got the big to be continued emblazoned across the screen, but still, some stuff to talk about here as we go to Italia for the second time in 2 seasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we'll break it all down of what goes on. Really on a night where just vibes. Right? Nothing mattered.
Nothing mattered. It was just vibes. I mean, I think we might see some repercussions next week, but I think for the most part, yeah, this was filler.
Yeah.
Well, Phil wasn't really there.
Yeah,
it wasn't much of a filler. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I will say that. I mean, listen, mega legs are always rare, and also I'll correct myself. They've gone to Greece instead of Italy last season. But the mega leg is interesting because when it happened in season 32, like this whole idea of double the detours, double the roadblocks, etc., was interesting until you sort of realize that double the detours, double the roadblocks essentially boils down to like, okay, it's just 4 tasks. And if you look at other Amazing Race seasons, including ones in the past or international ones, that's sort of the equivalent of a regular leg of the Amazing Race.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't necessarily seem like that big of an endurance deal as it was previously. But I use this as more of an opportunity to get to know the teams, see them shine a bit more. And I do feel like with probably the exception of 2 teams, I've really been liking the cast this season, and at least this was seen as an opportunity to like if it was a vibe season episode, to like watch them be able to interact more, get to know them a bit more, and just see those personalities pop amidst maybe some tasks and an outcome that we knew was already coming from the very first instant we heard the word mega leg.
Mike, is this a blind item, or will you reveal in this podcast the 2 teams that you did not make your top 8?
I mean, I can reveal it now if you want to, because I would be inclined to see if you all agree or disagree. Luis and Michelle and Aubry and David are the definition of go ahead, girl, give us nothing at this moment. I'm not really getting anything from them. They seem like pleasant people, but like
let me defend them in the most faintest way possible. Okay. So I will say for Aubry and David, at least that for David, this was kind of like a 5-hole task for him this week, that we kind of got that he works on the helicopters and he likes the Fast and the Furious. And so for him, this was a task that was literally in his wheelhouse.
I suppose so, yes.
Okay.
Liking the Fast and the Furious is definitely a personality trait that puts him in with like 80% of Americans.
And, at least for Luis and Michelle, we got in the trailer for next week where Luis is like really giving us movie announcer guy of like double the tasks. Like he really like helped hype up the mega leg.
We also got that they can't drive stick.
Mm-hmm.
So there's
yes,
that
of course, the very unique facet of Amazing Race teams that only Luis and Michelle don't know how to drive stick.
Who's not going to drive stick this episode?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of they win the I don't drive stick episode for the week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's basically a third roadblock in this mega leg, right? It's like, who doesn't know how to drive stick?
It was a factor. It definitely was a factor. Okay, so we will break that all down here. Oh, just overall though, that no non-elimination legs in season 34 of the Amazing Race, but we get the mega leg. Just, was it any different for you?
The only thing, as we mentioned, is that they told us up front that nobody's going home this week.
Mhm.
And that was, it's nice to be able to plan your week a little bit. But other than that, it felt like a dodge. It felt like they're
Mhm.
saying they got rid of non-elimination legs, but did they really? This is a leg. It's not half of a leg, it's a leg.
Yeah.
And it felt like, especially coming off of Amazing Race Canada, where they packed at least 5 or 6 tasks into every week, this felt like it dragged a little bit. I'm glad we
Mhm.
didn't get 90 minutes of it. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird that I feel like that I almost had like the opposite. Not that I was like, oh, I'm wanting more, but I kind of feel like the episode ended. I'm like, that was it. Like,
Yeah.
I guess this is it, because we don't even see Phil in the mega leg. I really feel like that if you're going to do the mega leg, like, have the 2 legs be in 1 hour or one night. Like, I feel like that
Yeah.
when they did it in season 32, that that's how it was presented, and I think that was like, okay, this is a really fun night, the mega leg, but the mega leg across 2 weeks is like not ideal.
I mean, it's incredibly similar to Survivor 41, right? We're down to Jeff Probst telling us in the beginning of the episode, it's going to be a 2-part episode. Nobody's going home in this one. They rectified it in season 42 and made the entire Hourglass thing one big 2-hour episode. So that way, by the end of the episode, there is some satisfaction in knowing that somebody's going home. Now, look, like, I can't be hypocritical and be like, there should have been someone going home here, because, again, like, non-elimination legs have been
Yeah.
part of the DNA of the Amazing Race since the very beginning. I'm not disappointed that, like, someone didn't go home at the end of this episode. I think it was an interesting spot to end it. I think they had to choose just like some climactic point. I suppose the despondency of Lumumba being left alone to tend to his motorcycle would serve as that point. I would say it was not the most like epic thing. I thought there was some interesting, though, much like last episode, some interesting placement changes happening, right? Like, look no further than the aforementioned Glenda and Lumumba, who go from, over the course of only 2 tasks, leaving in the first group to being left behind by all the other teams by the end of the episode.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that they are in contention to be the team that gets eliminated in the business end of the mega leg?
It's tough to say because, again, whether it's these tasks or these teams, we have seen so much jumbling up happening that, like, I can't count them out for surviving. I think on paper, you would think, oh, yeah, they're just way too far behind. But I think due to the self-driving and the stick shift stuff, which we'll certainly get into, certainly problems beyond Luis and Michelle in terms of that, between these tasks really tripping some teams up. I mean, again, look no further than the Roadblock, where basically everyone got bunched together at one point. I think there's definitely going to be a chance that Glenda and Lumumba are going to be able to keep Boom Boom in their, in their front view headlights. I keep looking forward with it. I think they're not necessarily out of the woods just yet.
Jess, I'm going to go out on a limb. Glenda and Lumumba. Well, I'm going to channel Brian Scally. Glenda and Lumumba will not be the 3rd team eliminated from the Amazing Race 34.
I think it's a satisfying story if they don't. I think we're being set up, and they've got so many hours of footage to play with and so many different stories they can tell. The fact that they're putting this one up front, I think the only satisfying way to resolve that is for them to live to see another day.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there are some teams that it's like, I guess I could, I could take or leave them. They could go home and it would be fine. But those are the teams that we don't know a lot about yet, and we could be saving them for later. Like, maybe we're getting a lot of Glenda and Lumumba right now because that's all the Glenda and Lumumba we're going to get.
Yeah, the thing that does give me pause is that I feel like that I didn't really get a team that also could potentially be, and again, maybe that these episodes are edited separately and we're not getting like the team having the disaster leg that is going to go home on the back half of the mega leg. That hasn't happened yet, so we're not getting that story. But if not Glenda and Lumumba, then who? I don't have a good answer for that.
Oh,
I
really? I would say like Rich and Dom.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are
They're
the
stars.
Right now.
They're stars too. We can't lose them.
But Rob, this could be another case of this is all the Rich and Dom we're gonna get, so we're getting every piece of it.
Can I maybe like give some information that again, I don't know if this is I don't know if this is
Oh,
considered a
I
spoiler.
think I know what you're
But
doing.
what
Yeah,
do
yeah,
you
yeah.
where are you gonna say?
There was a Real Love Boat event
Yes,
this
yes.
past week, right, featuring several CBS reality alumni, stars, and also Monty. And then I believe Rich
Come
and
on.
Dom were there, in addition to Will and James, of course. Huge faces of Amazing Race. They're hosting CBS, spaces on Twitter every Wednesday evening before the reality block starts. And Rich and
Mm-hmm.
Dom were there. Now, is it a local thing? Is it a possible look ahead to them doing well on the race? I'm not entirely sure. They have been far from stable in this race, much to our entertainment. I have really been loving them. I can't wait to get into, all the stuff that they've been doing as soon as this episode. Doesn't look great next episode, considering that Dom is going to have what looks like a mental breakdown over a sculpting task. So I think
I love them. I love them.
yeah, I mean, I really hope they end up being our like Kaylin and Haley, like consistently getting by the skin of their teeth each and every round, and then we close our eyes and open them, and they're in the final 5 or final 6.
Yeah, they are casting gold. I love them. Just what do you think of that theory of the team that's third out on the Amazing Race doesn't get an invite to go to the Real Love Boat premiere?
I would have to know who else was at this thing. Like, I would want the full
Kylan?
cast list.
No, none other
Okay.
than
Abby Maria.
another team in Declare, which we can now say is officially their ship name, because I did get a cease and desist from one of the parties involved saying, do not use the name I suggested last week.
Yeah, okay. So Abby Maria being there says to me that they invited everybody, and this is just who's local and showed up, because she is great, but she hasn't been on our television in like 5 years.
Okay. All of her placements have been I think that her worst finish is top 7.
Yeah, I mean, great player,
Mm-hmm.
but you know that Survivor likes to have you remember the most recent seasons. Like, if it was everybody from the cast of last season,
Mm-hmm.
then okay.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it was like just the most important people from last season, okay. This was like, you didn't get the invite, Rob, because you've moved out of LA, but you would
I'm
have gotten
sure
this
I
invite.
would have gotten an invite if I was still on the West Coast.
Yeah.
It's obvious. It's clear. It's makes that they definitely would have sent me one.
Let me put out a pretty cockamamie theory here. Rich and Dom coming first in the end of next episode, and Phil says, as a result of winning, you've won an invite to go to the premiere of The Real Love Boat happening in October of 2022.
Synergy. Yes. Okay.
I mean, they could also be one of those teams that's just really into it, because we have had Amazing Race teams who didn't necessarily light the world on fire in their season, but they show up to events all the time.
It's entirely possible they're local. Yeah, so I guess so. I guess
they're from Huntington Beach, so they may have been just in the area at the time.
Yeah. When we had TarCons, like, you'd get all the New York area people, then you'd get people that would travel that were on like 3 or 4 seasons ago, but just liked to show up and hang out. Maybe they just like to show up and hang out.
So I guess I'm just trying to manifest that they're going to be a big part of this season, because I enjoy watching them so much. So I guess we'll see if I think it adds some intrigue to, could they be, because I agree that if not Glenda and Lumumba, I guess they are probably the most likely, but I kind of feel like that we've gotten so much of them that I don't want to let them go.
I don't want to lose either one of these teams, though.
Yeah,
like, they're probably the two most exciting teams that we have.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Phil is like, well, then what do you all want? You say no, don't do non-eliminations, and then don't get rid of people. Make up your mind.
This is
Phil doesn't care.
It's the downside of having, a really good cast sometimes.
Somebody's thinking it, Jess.
You're killing your darlings. No matter what, you're losing a good team. So we'll see. But yeah, again, I think this episode was a fun way to like watch people pop. I will say Marcus and Michael have, I think, popped as well for me, surprisingly so, as like a very fun team. I think they have more of a sense of humor than maybe I regarded them as initially.
Yeah, I enjoy them. I feel like that it's been a lot of fun where Michael is doing tasks and Marcus is commenting on his brother doing tasks. That's been very fun.
Yeah, I think I can't remember if we talked last week about Marcus encouraging Michael to make love to the yodeling music.
It came up.
The Roadblock.
Yeah.
Yes, it did.
Yeah. Okay. I guess let's talk about the tasks this week, and then let's double back, and then let's talk about the teams. I think that's a good way to sort of like make sure that we cover everything. So, all right, Jess, what'd you make of this leg? We got the Amazing Race charter back in action for the first time this season. We headed out to Italy for the mega leg, and we kicked things off with the Detour, head of the class, or the Big Cheese.
I thought this is an interesting tactic that the Amazing Race doesn't take very often. There's not a lot of Amazing Race tasks that just reward raw knowledge, because you could listen to the lecture and learn from the guy, but this was trivia, and they don't test trivia on the Amazing Race very much, which is probably why they haven't called me. But
could you have done this, Jess? You knew all the
this.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I was an absolute dweeb when I was a kid, as opposed to now, when I'm incredibly cool. And I remember the very first thing I wanted to do with my life was study human anatomy. So I bought a college level anatomy course on video cassette and watched it when I was 10 years old. And I took my dad's steno pad and I took notes, copious, complex notes about human anatomy. For no reason. There was no test, no adjudication happening. It was just for my own jollies. So yeah, this is definitely one of those Slumdog Millionaire moments where I think something would have came to flash back for me. But I completely agree with Jess. We have the 5 holes, certainly, to that point about David's mechanical work, but very, very rarely is it, okay, you know this thing from outside the race, now it's going to come into play here. Usually when they get tested on things like the time zone stuff, infamously in season 21, like that's something you have to learn on the fly. I just thought that was a really interesting tactic as well.
Yeah. We watched it. I got George caught up on Amazing Race this week. By the way, he's turning 6 today. So happy birthday, George.
Yeah.
And we were watching this, and he even said he thought that it didn't even matter if you were in the lecture hall. You would have to know this stuff already. He's like, I don't think you could learn it just by listening to this guy. You'd have to be able to pull it out already. And he said the cheese looked like by far the easier task if you didn't have that knowledge to begin with.
I thought so too. Is George right, Jess?
I mean, George has read about a lot of things. He was 3 for 3 on picking winners of Amazing Race US. So.
Oh wow!
Oh my God, the new Nicole Cesternino.
Yeah, did he make the winner pick for the season?
He did finally, but I think it was tainted because he asked who my winner pick was first.
Oh,
but yeah, and so he said he agrees with me. He picks Derek and Claire as well.
Okay.
All right. I do think this was a very unbalanced Detour, which happens sometimes just due to like the makeup of the task. I mean, Derek himself said it, and it was vocalized on screen that I thought was definitely true, right? Of like a lot of these physical tasks on the Amazing Race, it's just, okay, put down your head, power through. It's much more straightforward than the brainier side of tasks. As long as you have the endurance, you'll get it done relatively quickly because it's that much simpler. And this is like a really tried and true example of that, right? Where the head of the class was fairly complicated, especially if you didn't know that much about anatomy, and took copious amount of times. Only a couple teams got it on the first try, as opposed to, it's not coincidental that, you know, when you look at the top 5 teams going into the roadblock, I think like 4 out of the 5 ended up coming from the Big Cheese, because it really was as simple as, if you had relatively good directions and like enough strength in the moment, you could just power through without any complications whatsoever.
It seems so much easier to do the Big Cheese.
Well, especially since this is a task that you get like every other leg of the Amazing Race, is a collect this thing and take it to this other place and get proof that you took it to the place and then bring it back to the origin point. And almost everybody is well versed enough in like how to read maps and how to ask people for directions that,
except for Sharik.
Yeah, except for Sharik.
Yeah.
That it just feels like you know this kind of task is going to be there, and so you know what it's going to be going in. Where I think that there's a lot more room for variance on the listen to a lecture and remember the details kind of task.
Yeah. As for that task, the head of the class, I also thought that was like a weird fit for Italy. Like I guess that they had that place where they can give a lecture, but I don't know. It just seemed odd that this was like you have so many things to do in Italy. Listen to this anatomy lecture and then, look at the operation game and put the tiles down and name all the parts of the human body did not seem like something that you would necessarily like, okay, that's what we're going to do when we go to Italy.
Well,
Yes, we move on to the water on the knee, and then the funny bone.
don't forget the Charlie horse.
Mhm.
I think the university was an interesting slant, but I think they struggled to come up with something that fit the oldest university in the Western world. And that I liked the anatomy. I wish it was a little grosser, maybe. That would have been more interesting.
Ooh,
Or
interesting.
if we'd used like the colloquial Italian words for everything instead of
Yeah.
the correct Latin word terms.
Mm-hmm.
There were ways to make it more interesting, I think. I don't think they want to make it any harder, which was the problem.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there
Yeah.
is sort of like a secondary attachment as well with like the Vitruvian Man of it all, right? With Da Vinci. There wasn't really a connection there explicitly, but I guess it sort of made sense. It's also tough to make entertainment out of, right? Sit down and listen to a thing and then take a test on it. Probably the most entertaining thing we got out of it was the entire Glenda and Lumumba sequence of failure before they finally realized the whole Emeris thing.
Emeris.
Something out of like Martin Short scenes in Father of the Bride.
Okay.
I think, and I honestly, there's a painting by a Dutch master that is one of these lecture halls where they're like giving people an anatomy lesson with an actual corpse. And I feel like that's the image that they want you to think of. But then it was like they're using the CPR dummy to point out the parts, and it wasn't very visceral. I think putting some actual viscera in there might have been interesting.
Yeah, you think, Jess, that maybe if they would have had maybe some corpses of people that donated their body to reality TV, where then they could have okay, pull out an appendix.
I'm surprised Bloom hasn't donated his body to reality TV yet.
Why do you think I'm just bones? They keep stripping me for organs at this point. That's all that's left of me.
Mike, it would not have been unlike the Tough as Nails challenge where they were in the junkyard, where it was Phil's all right, who knows what a carburetor is? All right, go back and bring me one.
And what's this thing? It's a spleen.
I mean, listen, the
Roofer
Amazing
Lee
Race,
knows.
maybe you'd understand in retrospect why the show now airs at 10 o'clock, because I think that's a little too graphic for the family show of The Amazing Race for the prime time.
It doesn't have to be real corpses.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mike,
it could be an animal corpse, or it could be those haunted house situations where you put your hand on the peeled grapes and it's
bringing back some spaghetti.
Mike, have you ever watched CBS any other night of the week at 10 p.m.? Do you know how many autopsies air on this network on the other non-reality shows? That's all it is.
Yeah, maybe they should have gone for the whole CSI, but the I stands for Italy in this aspect.
Yeah.
I mean, AJ Mass has told me a lot of things about Criminal Minds. I feel like I'm surprised that airs on a network.
Yeah. The whole network is reality TV, Young Sheldon, and autopsies.
Not in the
Even
same
their
place.
comedy is about dead people, place, Mike. The number one new comedy is Ghosts.
Here are all the parts of Young Sheldon. You must figure out, identify, where's this bow tie?
It's a crossover event of the century. And, CBS's audience, their target demographic is people with one foot in the grave. So it all comes together.
And it's spooky season.
It is
spooky season. Maybe they didn't. If they had realized that, I think maybe they would have gone perhaps for something a bit more gruesome. Yeah, that would have been interesting if we went with like bodies exhibit, right? Of like, here are all these cadavers, because then it almost becomes like a gross food challenge in addition to a memory challenge.
The roadblock then that the teams had to do was who needs a break, and we
Lumumba!
we needed to assemble a Ducati motorcycle, and so the teams were going to need to put that together. Now, I'm a bit of a motorcycle guy, but I didn't want to pay all that money. I actually have a gold Ducati. It's a fake.
It's a fake.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Hauls a lot of Cardassian, doesn't it?
Yeah. So, all right, we had to put together our motorcycles task, and I couldn't decide if I liked this or not.
This was probably one of those tasks that was more fun to do than it was to watch other people do it. And there's been a lot of those lately where it's like, this is probably for the sake of the game. This is a hands-on technical thing that is probably very satisfying when you finish it. But watching people do it, it's like, if I wanted to watch people put together cars, I could go watch the History Channel.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, not a lot of, unironically enough, more cars than dead bodies probably on that than on CBS.
Yeah, you would think.
Who knows what this is?
Rupert Lee's gonna be on a new History Channel show, I would imagine. He's gonna be the new Ancient Aliens meme guy. Yeah, I don't know. I actually like this. I think from like a design perspective, I always appreciate tasks where you feel like anyone could catch up at any point in time. Like, we'll talk about it, but look at someone like Emily and Molly who leapfrogged from 8th to 2nd just by doing this task well. I think it is a little repetitive to watch people go through it, especially keep making the same mistakes. But at least from like a conceptual perspective, I like the idea of like, you don't need to necessarily be a big gearhead to get into it. It certainly helps, as we saw with Aubry and David, but it really was, as is always the case, attention to detail, and especially just noticing little things like, oh, the clutch needs to be in neutral in order for the wheel to spin. It's always those types of little details that trips people up. So I feel like this was tried and true to The Amazing Race.
Mm-hmm.
They had almost the same task on this past season of Amazing Race Canada with a bike, not a motorcycle, where they had to put a wheel on and they had like gears and they had to watch the demo, and they devoted 5 minutes of the episode to it.
Mm.
And it was only because like somebody like took a part with them and had to come back. Actually, I don't think they even had to come back. I think they just kept the part, but they packed around so much other stuff around it that it was like, this was a satisfying component of the race. We could see where it affected placement, but we didn't have to spend half of the episode on it. And I think I would have liked a regular task sandwiched in the middle of these, like something colorful, like route info thing, just to break it up a little bit and give them something else interesting to do.
Yeah, because they also had to do 2 different things here on the Ducati. It wasn't just like put the wheel on. Then there was like another part, which was like, if anything, like harder to even figure out what was going on, of like sort of like then assemble like the plastic frame.
I don't know, if you ask Emily, it sounded pretty easy.
Yeah. Well, she does Legos.
Yeah, I built IKEA furniture. We'll get into it later. I am slowly loving the runner of Emily specifically being like, yeah, that was pretty easy. While like Claire is like just like weeping profusely about trying to get through this task. Like her like effortlessness is a very fun thing throughout these past couple episodes.
Yeah. I thought that at first I was like, I think I could probably do this. And then I remembered only about 4 days ago that I put together a bicycle for my son's birthday. And it took me a very long time and I was very frustrated. I was like, oh, no, that's probably like was easier than what this was ultimately going to be. Like, why is it making this noise? It doesn't make any sense. And I had like the wheel on backwards and the brake wasn't connected the right way. So I do not think in hindsight I would have been good at this.
I feel bad for the guy that has to do the demo. Like he's going to spend 3 hours like taking apart the motorcycle and putting the motorcycle back together.
I'm pretty sure there's like a Greek myth about that, right? About the guy that was punished by the gods to just keep taking the wheel off his motorcycle for Americans to try to figure out how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely in my Greek mythology treasury. At the same time that, Mike, when you were reading watching the anatomy videos and taking notes, I was reading the Greek mythology treasury.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a steno pad also?
I never took notes. I didn't take notes in
Wow.
college either.
Oh, okay.
Wow, look at this.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we did take notes about all of the teams in the Amazing Race. So let's talk through how everybody ultimately did. We don't have placements for this week. So I'm just going to go off of how they're listed on the Amazing Race wiki for this week. And they've got Marcus and Michael still at the top of everything. And they did seem like our front runners through this leg of the Amazing Race. They did start off hot coming out and were able to really ace the big cheese task right in their Wheel of Cheese house.
There was a moment where Michael said, "This is my first experience cutting 88 pounds of cheese in half." And it's like, yeah, I imagine that's going to apply to everyone in this cast, maybe everyone on the crew as well. It's not often something we experience in like Wisconsin,
Not enough cutting the cheese jokes, honestly.
Yeah, not enough. They did brand the guy that they had to bring the cheese to as the Cheese Meister, which is my alternate intro for Mike Bloom for this episode.
I mean, again, would be very appropriate considering my level of humorous. Yeah, Rob Schneider really having a return to form, right? Between the announcement of the Animal 2 and now the Cheese Meister.
Cutting the cheese. Doing the roadblock.
And Phil's intro of this was also weak sauce. This was very much like, I typed Italy into Wikipedia and here's what came up. It's shaped like a boot and they have two kinds of cheese.
Mm-hmm.
And Phil holds up like, this is mozzarella, this is Parmigiano Reggiano. These are cheeses in Italy. And I understand you had a mega leg so you could go sightseeing in Italy, but you could have at least done a little more homework.
Yeah, the Phil's intro on the plate is so odd. Of like, teams are heading towards the boot, commonly known as Italy. Just such an odd phrasing.
Yeah,
and it's not the first time he's pointed that out either. Like, that's his one fact about Italy, and he just hammers on it. Like the last time they were in Italy, I think he said it's shaped like a boot. And thanks, Phil. I've seen a map.
I would want to know that maybe somebody has some sort of like AI machine learning that could tell us, was this the episode of The Amazing Race that had the least amount of Phil in it of any episode of the entire series?
That's interesting. Because again, well, I don't know, because he still introduced tasks. He just wasn't at the pit stop.
Okay.
So I'm trying.
But is there any other episode where he doesn't introduce tasks? Like, and I even feel like that with the Ducati. Like, I feel like that we had Phil on the screen. Like, he was walking on an island in traffic for 4 seconds, and I think that was all we saw him.
It's a departure from, around season 25, 26, when he would just stand there as they're running around behind him and be like, there they are. They're about to do the task.
Yeah.
And this time it's like, I don't even know if he was in the same country at the same time. Like, he could have gone off and done something entirely different.
Yeah. Tough as nails mini season.
He was filming in the country commonly known as the boot, and his airtime got the boot this week. I mean, I'd be intrigued to look at when the Mega Leg
back on the charter.
When the Mega Leg wasn't the Mega Leg, right back when it was a to be continued, like we saw back in season 6 and 7. I wonder if it's comparable as well. But that also, again, had more tasks to it than usual. So maybe we just got more Phil then by proxy. Yeah, we were missing out. Again, not really a filler week in that regard. He just came on to do his little 3 segments, right? 2 for the Detour, 1 for the Roadblock, and that was it.
Here's what I want for Phil. I want him to have spent this entire Mega Leg eating pasta somewhere. He's just in a restaurant, kicking back. He's got a glass of wine, big plate of pasta, and everybody else is running the race, and he gets to have the week off.
And I would hope that he's eating that pasta with Asta and Nina.
One would hope.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Like-
yeah, for many reasons, because again, they're delightful. But yeah, I want Phil to have his Master of None season 2 moment where he can just luxuriate,
Yes.
eat pasta, not worry about the race. I'll meet you in Florence. It's fine. I might take a little bit slower to get there because I kind of have to waddle a bit after all the pasta I ate, but I'll be there regardless.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so for Marcus and Michael, then they were able to, blow through the cheese challenge. They get to assembling the Ducati, and we find out Marcus and Michael are motorcycle enthusiasts. Marcus even owns a Ducati, but he doesn't take it apart, which makes a lot of sense.
They're expensive. You don't want
Yeah.
to wreck things. Like, you're not my child who just takes apart everything.
Yeah, I really loved the transparency with which Marcus is like, listen, not gonna yuck anyone's yum, but like, this is what you pay people to do, right? Like, I'm not the one to get under the hood and just tinker around for the sake of doing so. If there's something wrong, there are people that are experts in it. They may charge me an arm and a leg, like I'll identify it head of the class, but I'm fine having other people work on it rather than myself.
Mm-hmm. I did think it was pretty interesting that in this roadblock, I feel like that almost all the same people that did the yodeling roadblock also were doing this one. And I know you have to kind of keep it balanced. I feel like that, especially like this early on, I almost feel like that you would have like, okay, I did this one, now you do this one. But we saw a bunch of people who had just done the yodeling roadblock also attempting this.
I think they're saving the other person for tasks that they know the first person can't do. I think in the early legs, there's a lot of, well, I can do this. I don't want to get stuck doing something that I definitely can't do. And I think like I think I read somewhere that like in Derek and Claire's case, especially, Claire is doing every task that she can do so that she doesn't get stuck doing like a heights task.
Yeah. Though it should be interesting to note, Linton and Sharik, Linton has done all 3 roadblocks so far. Because remember, the ice block was considered a roadblock on that first leg. So
An ice
we
block.
could be, yeah, exactly. So we could be seeing a situation where like Sharik will eventually have to do some, which should make for some interesting drama. Because again, Linton kind of seems like that jack of all trades, like knows a little bit about everything just due to his life experience. But there were some common strands of DNA, right? Michael did things twice. Claire obviously did. Emily did. So there was a little bit. I would not say that a lot of people. I'd say maybe half of the people we saw do this roadblock were the ones that did it the last time.
Okay.
Which is about as many as you'd get from random chance, right, Mike?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Flip a coin, basically.
Yeah.
And Michael really struggled. He could not figure out how to put the wheel into neutral. I have to be honest. I don't think that that's something I would like. I think it would put it together. I would not think about putting it into a different gear.
Yeah, I don't even know how you change the gears on a motorcycle.
Mm-hmm.
Is it up on the
be
thingies?
I'll be honest and show again why I was that nerd that took notes on anatomy when I was 10 years old. I didn't realize that motorcycles had a neutral gear. I just thought it was forward and reverse.
Who knew? Okay. All right. Well, yeah, we don't have Mike Bloom drive the stick shift either when we go on the Amazing Race.
Yeah, well, the two of you, like, I don't know which one of you I'm taking on the Amazing Race with me, but whoever it is, you better practice stick shift because I can't drive anything.
I think Mike's going to be more useful, Jess.
No, famous last words.
Mike's
Rob
going to be more
actually-
useful, and he's going to have a better attitude.
I take it back. I want the two of you to go, and I want to podcast about it
Okay.
for the one episode that I get to podcast about it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think I would do better than with Stephen Fishback.
Don't let him hear that, but at least he doesn't.
Well,
at least Mike doesn't hate the Amazing
Steven,
Race.
Steven, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I know
at least I don't substitute
recaps.
the Amazing Race and ask why do people like this show.
Did he do that? Did he tweet that?
Yes, he did.
He did, and then I kind of called him out on it, and then he promptly deleted it.
Probably. Sounds about right. All right. Anything else about Marcus and Michael this week?
They continue to be really, really solid. Again, I think they were able to take what they messed up in the first leg, which is really, again, like only one major thing, and able to institute it and move forward fairly seamless. Even the times that they've stumbled very little. It's interesting that in the previous zone, they're like, Marcus and Michael couldn't get on the same page when it came to the bells, when like, I feel like Rex and Tim were the ones that struggled much more on the bells comparatively. So I feel like they're making a bit of a mountain out of a molehill with another M&M. But again, I think these guys continue to prove themselves to be front runners, and we'll see if they can net themselves another first place finish next week.
Okay. Emily and Molly. Mike referenced that they are not really having a lot of trouble with these tasks to the point where they're like, it can't be this easy. We must be doing something wrong. All these other teams are struggling. No, they did start off the episode saying that they were struggling with their confidence, but hopefully they are starting to gain some of that confidence.
Yeah, they are easily becoming one of my favorite teams.
Yes.
It's a great story, and I think I would be second guessing it too. This is like every single one is Penn at the roadblock with the train being like, this can't be the clue. I just grabbed it.
Mm-hmm.
I really like their dynamic. I kind of like how dry their personalities are. Again, Emily, especially considering this is the second time where she's like, yeah, it was pretty easy. I got through it. Like, again, sometimes it's the Brian and Cynthia, right, Jess, of like, sometimes those types of personalities work out really well on television. But their dynamic continues to be one of the most intriguing things on the race. What seems to be their storyline is this idea of they're doing really well at the tasks themselves, but getting there always proves to be a problem. They seem to be one of the teams that struggled the most with the stick shift. But there's this really interesting moment, right, where I think it's Emily who's driving and is like really getting emotional over her struggles with stick shift. And Molly's like, I don't know her, so I don't know how she should be comforted. Like, so am I going to let her cry it out? Am I going to say it's okay? Am I going to be more so empathetic to her? And again, it's a great reminder of how they're getting to know each other over the course of this, despite the fact that from a genetic perspective, they have so much in common. So that was another fun, I think, sort of landmark in their relationship of thinking, yeah, again, they're basically strangers to each other to the point where they don't know how to comfort each other in moments of trials and tribulations.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're getting to know each other on The Amazing Race.
It's great. They get all the benefit of like the twin telepathy, but they don't have all of the baggage that comes with running the race with your sibling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's definitely a unique situation that we haven't seen before. So we'll see where it goes. They didn't really struggle at all with head of the class. They kind of got through that pretty quickly. So this was a good leg for them.
And it's also because I think one of the twins had worked in the medical field for years and years as well. So again, that to Jess's point, and we'll get into this with Quentin and Maddie as well, like having that random ancillary knowledge really paid off for them in so many ways.
The only thing they had trouble with was parking the car.
Parking cars is hard, Rob.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Let's talk about Aubry and David. Mike, what were your favorite Aubry and David moments from this episode?
Certainly when David geeked out, right? He's like attributing like, okay, this is the reverse bolt, so that way it holds it into place. Like, I love him just mindlessly listing off all of these things. I mean, this is what they're hoping for, right? Mm-hmm. This and the dance task last episode, like both of these are in their respective wheelhouses. It's why they, from a skill perspective, they are a really well-balanced team. So yeah, I think it makes sense why David ends up doing as well as he does here, because while he hasn't exactly worked on motorcycles, he knows a lot about mechanics. And I think much like we see with someone who doesn't know their way around a socket wrench, like there is certainly an aptitude that you can work your way around that would put you at least a few steps ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they came through. I don't even remember. What did they do? Did they do the head of the class, or they did the big cheese?
They did head of the class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, it must have been kind of uneventful because I don't have anything in my notes really.
So there was this one thing where it's less about them and it's more about how trolly the judge was. Remember when it was two of them and Rich and Dom, for some reason, standing in a single file line like they're in a kindergarten class, and this judge goes, "If you could give this to the people behind you, and also this one's for you." Such a troll move. I loved it. Might as well be giving away fireworks back from Amazing Race 29, because there were all those trolls hanging around in that class.
Oh my God.
I loved, there was a point where he like just threw the clues at people. And this was definitely going for like pencils down Hall of Fame.
Yes, a throwback classic Amazing Race type judge.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is always fun when they have these characters like in costume who really like get into like the Ducati people like weren't playing characters.
Maybe that was the problem with the Ducati task.
Hmm.
Like they didn't have, Luigi motorcycle there with like
Or Gold
But-
Ducati.
Gold Ducati
Well,
would have been good.
Mhm.
What they should have done is had Gold Ducati there being like pretending that this was their motorcycle, right? Like, I've got to get back in the race. Please make my motorcycle right now. Or you're going to the Bajoran work camps.
Yeah, maybe that's what makes an Amazing Race task of like having a character there to sort of like berate the
Yeah.
contestants.
Attention, Bajoran workers.
Mhm.
It's a popular Gold Ducat meme.
But please build my motorcycle.
Okay. For Luis and Michelle, they had some fun moments. Were they the couple that asked, how do you say yay in Italian?
Yes, that was very fun. And also, Michelle being forced to get out and push the car into reverse because they did. This is something we see a lot.
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't even say in stick shift. I'm remembering specifically like the really crappy cars they had to drive in Germany in Amazing Race 32, where like always the moments where someone has to get out and be the motor for the car are always very fun moments on the Amazing Race.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for them, I mean, seems like that they are like right in the middle of things. Not having a lot of like big moments where they are shining and excelling in the tasks, but certainly like not falling to the back of the pack.
Yeah, they're okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We haven't seen the best of them yet. But
I mean,
wait.
if I was still going on my like pick the most boring team to win, I'd say they've got definite winner upside.
Yes. All right. Well, again, we'll see next week when Luis debuts his character of epic movie trailer guy.
Which might show up in a roadblock.
Yeah, would be
Come
a
on
very
and do
fun
my
person.
voiceover, please.
In a world. Okay. Let's talk about Linton and Sharik, who they did have some struggles, specifically at the head of the class.
Yeah, this was not their finest hour. For sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's tough. I would have thought for a hot second, okay, when you have like 4 teams in a room together, should they have worked together to, you study this part, we'll study this part. But luckily, from the Amazing Race design perspective, they put everyone in separate stations to, I think, disincentivize that collusion to have teams work together. So you have someone like Linton and Sharik who do it, like 4 or 5 times. They were one of the first there, and they end up like leaving relatively in the middle of the pack of those teams just because they had such a tough time trying to keep all that information to themselves, which again, if you don't know with your coccyx from your ilium makes a lot of sense as to just like getting all these words 30 or so thrown at you, and you have to not only parse through them to figure out where they go, but then also separate them out from all the dummy words that got put out there as well.
It kind of
Mhm.
seemed like maybe not all the boards were the same either. I
Oh.
couldn't tell if you had to identify different parts and you had the dummy words and your dummy words were different from other people's dummy words. That would have been a great way to ensure that people didn't do that.
Mhm.
Here's the thing I didn't understand I didn't see anybody doing this. There was the organs part and the bones part, and no teams were dividing it up so one person was doing the bones and one
That's
person was
smart.
doing the organs.
There
Yeah.
was one thing with Linton and Sharik where it was like 2 seconds where Linton was reaching over to the left side and Sharik says, "No, you concentrate on your side, I'll do mine." So maybe that happened, Jess. Maybe on like their second or third time they realized that's the thing to do. That's one of those things too where like I really give a lot of props to Emily and Molly and Quentin and Maddie for doing it after one attempt, because this definitely feels like a challenge where you have to do it at least once to be like, okay, the first time, now we actually see what the quiz is. The first time, you're probably just trying to memorize all the words that you can, all the random facts, much like we saw last time, right, with like the Saints test in Amazing Race 33 of you don't know what's being asked of you. Once you know what the rubric is for the test, then you can go back and fixate on those types of things rather than trying to memorize all the random factoids that this guy's throwing out to you.
Yeah, or even the barest distillation of this is the task on the first leg of Amazing Race 13, where they said there's a guy waiting at the top of the stairs to ask you a question when you get to the top of the stairs. And when everybody got to the top of the stairs, he said, "How many steps have you climbed?" And you don't know he's going to ask you that. Now you know that. You can go back down and go back up the stairs and tell him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you missed, you had to sit through the lecture again. You couldn't just go and do like, just, okay, like, give us another shot to get the 90 seconds.
Yeah, again, it's unlike the Sate stuff from last season, right? Where like people stood around to hear the information that they wanted to, and then they could just bolt. You had to sit through, I believe, the 8-minute lecture. They locked the door, I believe.
Oh my
or
God.
it was just rude to stand up and leave this man's lecture in the middle of all the hard-earned work that
Very
he did.
rude. Okay. All right. And then for Linton and Sharik, we saw Linton working on the motorcycle on the Ducati, and he was struggling with this as well.
It was rough.
Yeah. Again, I can't tell you exactly what his struggle was, but he was not getting through it quickly.
Well, I mean, that's the problem with this task in general. It's like you can't really tell what people are struggling with.
I mean, aside from the top 3 teams that we spoke about, it seems pretty much everybody struggled with it. I think the main 2 things were not figuring out the wheel spinning. The vast majority of the problem with that was just like putting it in neutral. And the other thing was, as Emily muses, like when it came to putting the body panels on, one had to go on specifically before the other one, or it wouldn't be flush. So I think those were just like, again, deceptively simple in what you needed to do. But if you didn't have the mind to fixate on those types of things, then you'd be very lost.
Yeah. It seems like also there was some sort of an issue with the ratchet of like getting it, like we had to reverse it at a certain point to get it to turn a different way. And that was definitely something that came up for Derek, X, and Claire. And so they actually got off to a pretty hot start in this episode. They did the big cheese, having no problems. I kind of thought their cheese was going to get stolen. They like have their
Claire
wheelbarrow.
certainly did.
Yes. I'm like, oh my God, I think somebody's going to steal their cheese. It didn't happen.
What do you think that situation would be? Because we know we had like the James and Abba stuff, right? Where a taxi driver drove away with their passports. If someone stole their cheese, would they get time credit to them? Would a producer just wave them through and say, here's your receipt?
I think this should be part of the task. I think it's like, deliver your cheese to the restaurants, but watch out for the cheese thieves.
Okay, and the cheese thief is a giant rodent that comes out and is we're gonna wheel away, and you have to like then like chase him with a broom.
Just this poor PA dressed up in a rat costume, like, oh, here I go. Oh, I love a Parmesan.
Like, it's the rat. Get him, Derek X. He's like, gotta tackle him, chase him with the broom. So luckily, no wheels of Parmesan were stolen. And then so they went off to go and assemble the motorcycle. And this was presented to us as that, okay, Claire is going to make up for the yodeling by doing this roadblock.
So she struggled with the last roadblock, so this is like redemption for her.
Redemption time. And I kind of thought that, I know that Claire works with AI and robotics, and I thought that, well, maybe this is actually something that Claire is like has some sort of like engineering background.
I think she's not necessarily a Christian Hubicki in like getting, her hands dirty with it. I think a lot of her stuff is more programming, which is done behind the computer. I feel really bad for Claire, especially, and also for Derek here, who like is having his own little meltdown on the sidelines, because like it's got to be really tough to see history repeat itself, right? Especially from Claire's perspective. Though I really hope that this is going to sort of like what we saw with Kim and Penn, right? How Kim's entire storyline was her feeling like she couldn't measure up and having a lot of anxieties, and then her Mike Bloom at age 10-esque copious amount of note-taking ended up winning them $1 million. I'm hoping for a storyline later on in the season where like Claire actually does find this redemption from Roadblock, because right now 2 strikes is rough to watch.
I feel like my favorite kind of team is the team that really is open about how much they're struggling, especially when that team turns out to be pretty good in general, because they've struggled, but they've also done well. I think struggling and doing well is much more satisfying than struggling and getting eliminated.
And ultimately, they're fine, with the help of Dom, that Derek X was able to channel some energy and
Oh,
sent it to Claire, that he was able to support her with his heart, send that positive energy to Claire, and ultimately completed the task.
I love that moment so much. I mean, we'll talk about it again. Dom is a star in her own right, but I loved her like almost being a bit of a relationship counselor to Derek X as well, and be
Hmm.
like, you need to send her energy forward. And she reaches out and touches his hand, and instantly about like 40% of the Big Brother fandom's like, if only I were Dom in that moment.
Hmm. Yeah. So, did it work? Was that what ultimately put Claire over the edge?
Can't prove it didn't.
Exactly. Correlation, causation, whatever you want to say, they're able to make it through. And I think it's a really good point, Rob, that no matter what, they are able to rally at the end of the day. I think they have enough strains. But I actually really like how variable they are. Like Jess and Cody, for instance, were pretty good at basically everything. And so I think I'm more entertained by someone like a Derek and Claire who have a lot more ups and downs. It's got to be rougher for them, obviously, and like their
Hmm.
blood pressure. But at the same time, I'm much more entertained by this than I would be if they just continued to coast like they did in that first place in the first leg. I like seeing the struggle from a
Yeah.
good TV perspective.
Yeah, and they're so much fun to watch. So I don't think this is going to be too much of a setback here with this little bit of a struggle with the roadblock. I think they're going to be fine in the second half of the mega leg and beyond. All right, let's talk about Abby and Will, who I guess are kind of like a little bit under the radar, where we're talking about Aubry and David and Luis and Michelle, but there's another couple in a relationship that I think that might deserve some of our attention here.
To that
Yeah,
point,
I
go ahead,
forgot they
Jess.
were on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, to that point, I mean, I know we're only a few legs in, but I'm wondering because I think we had something like 7 couples on this season. Do we think that's too many? Again, we're only like a quarter of the way through the race, but considering how the indistinguishability, we should mention that all the teams we mentioned that are a bit under the radar are all sort of like part of the same relationship. We haven't seen a lot of fighting between them. Do we think it was a mistake to cast so many romantic couples on this season together?
It's hard to say because we don't know like who else they could have cast, and we're not trying to single out Abby and Will, but they just really have not had much of a story so far through 3 episodes of The Amazing Race. It's been hard for them to really find their own storyline that's different from, and they've been fine. Like maybe if they were doing worse in The Amazing Race, like we would get to know them a little bit better, but really it has been kind of a quiet 3 episodes for Abby and Will.
I mean, honestly, romantic couple is the least interesting relationship dynamic on The Amazing Race.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of room for variance in there, but if you're a romantic couple that gets along with each other and your story's pretty rote, I think you struggle to pop.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why in the blind date season, I would say the majority of the most entertaining pairs were of those that were, blindingly paired together rather than the pre-existing couples, is because again, like their dynamic is pretty much worked out. And I think when you have a diversity in relationships represented, you can at least lean on those relationships when it comes to a storytelling perspective, right? Like Emily and Molly and Michael and Marcus, both siblings, both have completely different stories and different relationships therein. Here it seems like everyone's in like very nice, very stable romantic relationships. And as a result, then you have to more so lean on the personalities like a Rich and Dom and a Dora, Derek and Claire than you do, okay, these two are on The Amazing Race together. Let's see how this couple ends up bearing out.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything of note from Abby and Will this week? They were kind of just there. Okay. But they're in the middle of the pack. They don't seem like they're in danger of being eliminated on the back half of the mega leg. Let's talk about Quentin and Maddie. And I wonder if we're sleeping on Quentin and Maddie because that they had the colossal error last week where they ended up not being in the right country But outside of that, and maybe it's sort of like, other than that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln? They have blown through all of the tasks that they have been involved in.
Except for the motorcycle one.
Yeah.
I was surprised that they ended up leaving in 8th. I think it was just that Quentin had problems with those 2 mistakes that we mentioned earlier, though he had a really great talking head, right, where he talked about having a moped as a kid, and one of the neighbor kids pushed him off because he was jealous that he didn't get one. Big night for mopeds on CBS reality TV, for better and for worse.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm not going to say it. Okay. But for Quentin and Maddie, they are really, doing very well. Like there's been a couple times where they've just like gone through these tasks and just incredibly quickly.
Yeah, if they can. It's like Emily and Molly. If they can get to the task, they'll be fine.
Yeah, I had a feeling, even without knowing Maddie took that anatomy class, I had a feeling that, like, if they are dance teachers, you definitely know stuff about the muscles, I think, when you, like, teach dance, just because of, like,
pulling muscles. Yeah.
Certainly pulling muscles, but I think as well, like, what dance moves, utilize which muscles, certainly stretches, I think, to relieve muscles as well. So I think that there would have been, like, some amount of aptitude knowledge when it comes to that. But yeah, it turns out that Maddie really had this fantastic collegiate secret that had them being one of the rare teams to do it in one try. I definitely agree that I think they have their couple things that trip them up, but usually they're going to do at least pretty well, which I think has the makings of, like, a team that should have some big legs, not mega legs, to make it towards the end of the game.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about Rich and Dom, because they bring so much to every single thing. It was their anniversary, and they were having some struggles. Rich was having some struggles driving the car. Dom reminded him, okay, don't let the car have any sort of like impact on you. Remember, like it's just an object. Doesn't have any control over you.
Yeah, she said it's just an object. Objects can be manipulated.
That's right. And so, yeah, they're having Rich really struggled with the car. I thought that they were like, he was like pulling into like an intersection. I was like, okay, well, that's going to be it for Rich and Dom. Like a couple of like stalling out like in the middle of the road. It's not great.
Not great.
Yeah. Okay. So Rich and Dom, they're struggling with the car. And then they were also struggling with the first part of the detour, the head of the class.
Yeah. Another thing I want to peg here, though, like, I don't want to throw things onto poor Sharik. Lost in all this, quite literally, Dom says that she doesn't know how to read a map either. Which, like, again, you assume that the couple works out before the season. Okay, I'm going to do the driving. You're going to do the navigating. Now, Asta and Nina spoke about this in my interview with them, that, like, they had actually switched for whatever reason once they saw that the car wasn't a stick shift. But maybe that's the case where, like, Rich is usually the navigator. I'm just a little confused, to be completely honest. I don't know if Dom thought that she might possibly just manifest that they would find the location without needing to consult a map. But if the assumption is that Rich would drive and Dom would navigate, a little bit of map reading goes a long way here.
Yeah, for sure. But look, when you have the universe on your side, Mike, you're gonna figure it out. Okay.
I mean, I can't speak from experience. The universe is almost never on my side. So I look upon Dom with all the love and light, green tinted, because I am incredibly jealous of the mer fairy spirit that she ended up bringing here, despite the fact that, again, she's like, I don't know exactly how to get to where we're going, but I feel like the universe will guide us there. Just let's not put obstacles in our paths.
We'll get where we need to be. Okay? The universe is going to make sure of that. So, Rich and Dom are going to also have struggles on the back half of tonight's episode, where then Rich is going to be struggling with putting the Ducati together. And we're going to see Dom. First, she helps Derek X, and then works to send the positive energy to Rich. She is sending him energy, strength, balance, and focus.
This was a great moment, because her contribution thus far has been mostly like when she has to do tasks, she gets very up in her head about it and is not radiating love and light. And usually when you have a character like that on The Amazing Race, like that's all they are. Like they're the hot mess and then their partner is the stabilizing influence. So I really liked seeing this side of her where she, sends vibes to Rich, who's having a kind of a day on the struggle bus, and he's the one that needs the reassurance and the grounding. And she's not put in the slot of being the hot mess for the entire race.
Yeah. So, and then ultimately, Rich pulls it out, and he's able to move on. And that brings us to Glenda and Lumumba, who they had just like the disaster leg of The Amazing Race. Now, if you're going to have a disaster leg, good to have it in the first part of the mega leg.
Maybe that's the thing. They saw that it was a mega leg, and they're like, all right, let's work out all the kinks in the first half. And then by the time the second half comes around, we'll be okie day.
Yeah, let's burn our disaster leg on this. Like, is this a new like Amazing Race thing, like the Express Pass?
Yeah, every team has one disaster leg, and so you might as well burn it in the first half of a mega leg.
Yeah,
totally.
Because I feel like almost every single Amazing Race team is going to have like at least one night where everything goes wrong. And when I used to play a lot of Madden, I would have like a game, like I'd be like, I would win every game. And then sometimes it's just like you have like one game where no matter what your team is fumbling, it's just like, okay, well, this is the game where, everything is just going to go wrong and there's nothing you can do to overcome it. And that was a little bit Glenda and Lumumba in this leg.
Yeah, it was very much like last year's. This was like the Bengals Jets game, right? Where the Bengals like, okay, we'll have our one game where we get routed by the Jets, and then we'll go on to the Super Bowl. It's totally fine. We have to work it out.
So for Glenda and Lumumba, really things started off on the wrong foot, where they ended up not reading the clue. Amazing Race 101 said, drive to the task, and they tried to walk, and then they also got lost.
Yeah, read the clue. I feel like we had two of the Amazing Race tenets this episode, like know how to drive stick and read your clue.
Yeah.
So, and this was interesting, right? Because we got like, I think the first little tiff between the two of them, where we got like the odd footage, right? The wide shot of like them standing on the corner, kind of bickering with each other, which made it seem like the camera had like caught them in the act, when really isn't the entire onus of the show that they're being followed by cameras anyway. But yeah, what was the argument? I couldn't even tell.
She was asking him at one point, like, why are you looking for directions? I thought you knew where you were going. And then, or he did know where he was going and he stopped to ask for directions, but she didn't like that he stopped to talk to somebody.
Yeah, well, I could see that being annoying.
Yeah.
Where you say, I've got the plan, and then you don't communicate that you don't have the plan, and you just start asking everybody. That can be very annoying.
Yeah. And then they go back and they read the clue and they see that it says drive. And so they go back and get the car, and then they head off to head of the class, where it is also a struggle for them, particularly with the accent of the man who was teaching the anatomy class.
Yeah, I think they took, when you get the sequence, the montage of them getting stuff wrong time and time again, that's never good. We got that with Rex and Tim last week, right, where they went through things. The show said about 10. They said in my exit interview it was probably closer to like 30. That's never a good sign. Frankly, I'm surprised that them and Rich and Dom ended up leaving at the same time, because it seemed like how much time had passed. It's interesting that we got the sequence, I should say, of them getting it wrong so many times, but we didn't get the same thing from Rich and Dom. Like, what does that imply? Does that imply they were there and then Rich and Dom showed up for the last couple? Was it that Rich and Dom were struggling alongside them, but for some reason we didn't see it? I was just really intrigued by that choice.
I don't know. Maybe it had more to do with that Glenda and Lumumba didn't have as many problems with the car. And then so that they were like sort of like over there, that they would have been there first. But then they ended up getting lost running around. Whereas if you were struggling with the car and actually getting there, maybe you got there later.
It's but possible.
Who knows?
Anything's possible.
Yeah. And so they're struggling with that. We talked about that they didn't realize that Emer's is the humorous. And so they ultimately they
Emer
figure.
sounds like the fly inevitable hybrid of Omer and his emu shirt.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I like that. Put that together, and that could be its own shirt. The Omer Emers, with Glenda and Lumumba riding it off.
It is
Yeah.
orange, so it fits right in with their decor.
Please don't
Mhm.
give Johnny Fairplay any more ideas.
So then we see where Lumumba is going to work on the motorcycle, but he's struggling with that also.
I love him saying, "All right, slow and steady." Glenda's like, "No, slow and steady. We're in last place right now."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And ultimately, Lumumba says he's good at following the directions, but we see that he is still stuck on this motorcycle.
I mean, and then we kind of fade to black on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the ultimate version, though, Jess, right, of the trope of if it cuts to a commercial and the team's struggling, by the time it comes back, they're going to be fine. Where we're going to pick up next episode, and Lumumba's going to be like, oh, "Okay, I finished it. Now we can go."
Well, Jess, what's the call on that? So if you say that if a team is struggling and they go to commercial, when they come back from commercial, they'll figure out what it's going to be. If a team is struggling and we end the episode next week, what will happen?
Next week, nothing happens because that's the weakest. Like, that seemed like such a weak place to end the episode. That means they didn't have anything better.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's like it goes double if they end the episode on it.
Okay, so the back half of the mega leg, are we staying in Italy? Are they headed to just another
they're going
part
to
of Italy?
Florence.
Okay.
They're going to Florence, yeah. So it's double the cities, double the roadblocks, double the detours. I believe was also part of the marketing.
Florence,
All
the
right.
city I have been to. So
Okay. Do you have any predictions on the task?
the one thing I remember in Florence is they have this huge cathedral. I don't know if they can get a camera in there, but you have to go up like something like hundreds and hundreds of stairs to get to the top of this cathedral. And if I were designing a leg in Florence, I think I would probably put people on those stairs somehow.
Yeah. It looks like we're going to be like carving something from stone in the episode next week. And it looks
You
like
need an
that
art themed task for Florence for sure.
Dom is going to look like she's having some struggles, which sounds very exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Of
Anything
course.
else from part 1 of the mega leg?
No, I think
It
again,
happened.
like
Yeah.
the tasks were, fine, but I think that's allowed a lot of the teams to be able to shine. I know that we sort of, talk a bit about out of both sides of our mouths about some of the teams that are a bit more under the radar, but I do think this was a fun episode for a good amount of teams, and it's I've been very positively skewing with these cats, especially having the extended time to get to know them last week. This week, even if the tasks themselves are so, I think it allows the teams to have their own little random moments of character that I always enjoy about The Amazing Race.
Okay. All right. Jess, what's coming up for you?
Well, this is a busy day for me. I guess we can announce it, Rob. Are we allowed to announce it?
Sure. Why not? Because you know what? Let's reward the people that are made it all the way to an Amazing Race recap. Okay.
All right. So the Mole Patrol got shanghaied back into service, and we will be covering the Mole for Netflix. Josh and Zed and I, and we will be joined by an extra special guest who, for some reason, has decided to jump on the Mole with us. And that's Mr. Rob Cesternino, who's right here.
I'm very excited. I was a big mole guy back in the day. And so I'm very excited to see what the 2022 reboot of the Mole looks like.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting because with the original Mole Patrol podcast, Zed and I had both seen the seasons many times and knew who the mole was, and Josh did not. And now nobody knows. It's all up in the air. So
yeah,
we can all be equally wrong. We can all experience the joy of finding out together who the mole is.
Yeah, should be a lot of fun. So I'm really looking forward to that. Well, what else do you have coming up, Jess?
Well, we've got Walking Dead coming up. Walking Dead is now we're 2 episodes deep into the final season fragment of Walking Dead. And so our panel of Josh Wigler and Chappelle and AJ Mass and I get together every week to talk about what happened on there, which is always a joy. Even when the episode itself is not a joy, we have fun talking about it. That's over on postshowrecaps.com. And then Also, we have a very special, one more special chunk of Amazing Race content coming up. Dan Heaton and I are getting together later today to talk to the winners of Amazing Race Canada, Catherine and Craig, and we will get to ask them a lot of questions. And there was some weirdness in that season that I cannot wait to dig into. I hope they're allowed to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So looking forward to all of that. Great job, Jess, covering part 1 of the Mega Leg. Okay. Mike Bloom, what's coming up for you?
Well, I'll start with mole adjacent stuff because I had the pleasure this week of speaking with one of the executive producers of The Mole, Chris Colviner, who, interestingly, connected to Amazing Race, one of the EPs on Amazing Race Australia as well. So I think comparatively, probably a much easier time making The Mole than Amazing Race Australia, or at least so far from what I've seen. But that's already up at parade.com. Got his thoughts as to the surprising inspiration behind what ended up bringing The Mole back. He talked a bit about some of the more unconventional editing choices that happened in this season. It's really not spoilery. We just get into like some small details to foreshadow what's going to happen when The Mole premieres on October 7th. But you can check that out at parade.com in addition to my interview with this week's Survivor Boot. Obviously, with part 1 of the Mega Leg, no Amazing Race exit interview for any of us. But if you want to check out my interview with Rex and Tim, which was very fun, you can check that out as well. Over on post-show recaps, covering House of the Dragon and Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. I think both of which had maybe my favorite episodes of the series so far happening this past week. So a lot of fun with that, talking heroes with Josh as well. So many things happening. And Leon and I are going to have Jaunty Jordan Kalish on the B&B this week.
Forgot about Jaunty Jordan Kalish.
Should be a lot of fun. I have no idea what he is going to bring to us, but it is sure to be kooky.
Okay, well, I am also very excited. Busy podcast day for me. Not to brag. I think it might be 5 podcasts today for me. This is the first of those. And I am very excited that I think I'm going to make history because I think I am going to be the only person in the world to podcast about all 3 parts of the CBS reality trifecta from Wednesday night. That's Survivor, The Amazing Race you just heard, and The Real Love Boat. Okay?
That show that's before The Amazing Race, do we think it's going to stay in the 9 o'clock slot, or do we want to make bets on what date that The Love Boat will switch places with Amazing Race?
But for why? Like, because that I think that they're going to do everything they can to help The Love Boat. The Amazing Race,
I saw a commercial where Jerry O'Connell said, "Hey, Survivor fans, stay tuned. The Real Love Boat's coming up."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw Jeff Probst talking about The Real Love Boat on like a TikTok also.
Really?
Yeah, they're never going to do anything to help The Amazing Race. They're like, Amazing Race is fine. It has its fans. We could do anything in this time slot.
They love a task.
Yeah. They'll find it. They'll watch it. We don't have to convince them to watch it. But Real Love Boat, that's going to take some selling.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So find out how it went when I talk about The Real Love Boat with Jenny Autumn and Kirsten McInnes. Okay. Later on today. So be on the lookout for that, plus everything else we have coming up in terms of our Survivor coverage as well. Thank you so much for listening to our Amazing Race recap. Take care, everybody. Have a good one. Bye.